Well, hello there, small group leaders. I want to address this next section with you when we're talking about how to cope with the circumstances. Now we're going to talk about sorrow, and I want to help you through the time of life where you're going to feel sorrow and how to get through that sorrow, because the next phase after sorrow is struggle. And I believe if we can get through these phases, you get into a time of surrender, then you're going to find your life going to have more meaning, more purpose, more joy. You're not going to feel depressed. You're going to be able to feel more like a human being. You're going to be more connected to God. And so this section really is to deal with the sorrow part. I wanted to start with the scripture out of Luke 4:18. Luke 4:18 says this: "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because He has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted and proclaim liberty to the captive, and recover sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed." I hope that what we talk about here helps you to deal with the sorrows and the things in your life so that you can get your life back and not live so miserable. At the beginning of this message, I told you that there are 6 things that you will deal with. The 6 things are sorrow. First, you're going to have shock, sorrow, struggle. Then, hopefully, you'll get into the restoration or the surrender, restoration, and engagement phase. I also said that everyone will face bad news. Everybody will go through an emotional crisis. At some point in your life, you will have to face bad news. You will have to face a loss. So the first one we talked about was shock in life. There are different levels of sorrow. For instance, you may not feel as much sorrow for a loss of a job as you would for a loss of a loved one, a mom, a dad, a sibling. There's going to be different depths to the sorrow that you feel. I remember when we got bad news one day and we were all pulled in the lunchroom and they said, guess what? The job is going away. We're closing the plant. We felt the sense of loss. We had the shock. Then we had to deal with okay, what are we going to do now? There was actually a sense of loss. People were crying and there was sorrow and relationships that were built over time. So whatever the loss may be, though it might be at different levels, at some point you're going to need this message. You're going to need help getting through the sorrows in life. So this series, I want us to take a minute to look at our life, to write these things down, and just help you to deal with the sorrow in your life. I want you to be prepared in advance to handle great loss in your life and to cope with whatever comes into your life. No matter how difficult it gets, you'll be able to deal with the troubles that come into your life so they don't devastate your life. You can get through anything if you can at least do some of these steps. I want to share 5 things that you can do with sorrow. And I'm going to start here and we'll continue it on into the next week. First of all, I want you to understand that loss is inevitable, but grief is a choice. I want you to understand that grieving is a part of the process for healing. It helps you get through your crisis. But so many people don't want to deal with their feelings. It hurts too much. It's too hard. I don't think I can deal with it. I'm going to lose my mind. No, you won't. Grieving, you have to understand, grieving is part of the healing process. If you don't learn to grieve, you stuff it down inside. And that's a big mistake. If you refuse to deal with your grief and feelings and loss, you will carry it around in your life and you will feel miserable, down, depressed. And at some point you will need to deal with this in your life. But if you feel depressed, anguish, anger, you don't even know why you feel angry, broken, all kinds of different feelings that you can't seem to deal with, I believe that you might be dealing with not grieving over wherever it is or whatever it is that you need to be grieving over. You've had a loss. You've had a broken relationship, a loss of a job. I've mentioned that. A health problem. You lose your finances. If you haven't learned to grieve over these things and deal with this loss, you will hold it up inside and you will feel absolutely miserable. I want you to know something. There is no life without change, and there is no change without loss, and there is no loss without pain. If I were to ask you if anything in your life had changed, you would probably say, yes, I've changed. You change physically, your environment changes, your job changes, even your family changes. Everything that we have, it changes because life is dynamic. Life is not static. It doesn't stay the way it always is. It is always changing. There is nothing that ever stays the same. Things around us all the time change, and our environment is constantly changing. And many people struggle with change. You know why? Because it feels different. It's unfamiliar. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable. They don't know how to deal with change. Change for some people can be very frustrating because there isn't anything that we can do about the change. It just happens. And when things change, there is a sense of loss in that change. And whenever we lose something, there is oftentimes pain associated with that loss. But if we deny those losses, those hurts, those pains, and we don't let ourselves be sorrowful, we will bottle it up inside. And if we can't learn to grieve, we'll carry that around. But we shouldn't do that. Grieving is healing, is part of the process of healing. I've already said that. Learn to cry out to God. Let your feelings be felt. Let Him and others help you in your time of sorrow, and you'll have a fulfilled life. If you want to grow in your spiritual walk, then learn to grieve in a proper way, and you will find that you will begin to grow spiritually. Many people think that the word grief is only associated with when somebody dies or at a funeral, but that's not it. We all feel losses, and so we grieve over different things, different ways, and a different level or depth of our sorrow, but we all feel the loss. Grieving isn't just about a funeral or losing a loved one. It's about any kind of loss you might have in your life. And if you don't learn to deal with this loss and learn how to grieve it, you will feel anxiety. And you might even have hypertension. Whatever you feel, if you haven't learned to grieve, you're going to carry this around. There are things in your life probably that you've never grieved over. And because you've never grieved over it, you are stuck at a certain stage in life. There are things that happened in your childhood, in school, in your adult life that you have never grieved over, and you are still stuck there if you look back. Now take an inventory of your heart real quick. Do you feel angry? Do you feel any of these things, anxiety, any of the things that I've already described? And then go back to, when did you start feeling this way? And I would venture to say that there is something in your life that you have not gone back to and learned how to grieve over. And when you learn to grieve, you begin to let it out instead of stuffing it in. If you want to get unstuck from where you are, learn to deal with your feelings and your emotions so you don't have to feel miserable inside. I want you to understand something, that grieving is healthy. Grieving is healthy because it helps you deal with your emotions. It helps you deal with the loss of a life, your crisis. I want you to understand that grieving is God's design for you in life to help you get through your emotional crisis in life. If you let the grief in and out and you start to feel it, you will be able to transition from how you feel in that loss, and you begin to move on from wherever you got stuck. I didn't say that we would forget. We shouldn't help us. We should remember our past. But don't stay stuck there. We have to move past the crisis, past the hurts, past the pain, so you can begin to heal. If you don't learn how to do this and allow yourself to grieve, you will find yourself stuck at whatever stage where you felt that loss. Have you ever wondered why you have anxiety, phobias, fears, low self-esteem? It's because you haven't learned to grieve properly. You haven't learned to feel the loss. You haven't learned to mourn over whatever loss. And it's just packed up inside there, way down deep inside. And you've been carrying it around for so long, you don't even know why you feel angry anymore. You just get angry. You just feel fears and phobias. I want to give you some ideas on how to deal with these things and hopefully help you grieve them so you can get them out. Looking at the life of Jesus, do you know Jesus wept and grieved? He did it on at least 2 occasions that I know of in the Bible. First of all, when you look at John 11:33 through 36, it says, "Therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled. And he said, 'Where have you laid him?' They said to him, 'Lord, come and see.' Jesus wept."
Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him."
And in this particular type of grief, I don't think Jesus was really grieving over the death of Lazarus. I believe Jesus was grieving over the people of the non-belief. Jesus was God. He was the King of Kings. He was raising people from the dead, healing sick people. And I think it was their lack of faith, lack of belief that he was actually weeping for the people that were around him. Now, the Bible doesn't say that. He says that Jesus wept. But Jesus grieved. And this isn't just weeping. This is a throbbing, just an outright cry. Okay, he was crying, literally crying. I want you to look at Luke 19:37 through 42. This is the second time the Bible records Jesus actually weeping and crying. Okay, he says, when he came near to the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of the disciples began joyfully to praise God and in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. I tell you, he replied, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out. As he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city, he wept over it, and said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but how it has been hidden from your eyes. You see, Jesus wept deeply and sorrowfully. He was weeping, and I believe he was even weeping for the Pharisees. He was weeping for those around him, for their disbelief, because he was coming to the point where he was going to have to give his life for them. And he wept over them. He cared for them. And in these two instances, Jesus actually started crying. He had felt deep sorrow in his heart and in his stomach. I want you to know that sadness isn't weakness. When you are moved to deep sorrow and moved when someone else is sorrowful, it is a sign of strength, not weakness. Don't think it's a sign of, many men think, well, I can't cry. Stuff it up. We're telling kids, when they fall down, hurt themselves, don't cry. Be strong. Why not? It hurts. Let them cry. Let them get it out. It's actually unhealthy to bottle it up inside and refuse to allow your emotions out because it's the beginning of the process of healing for your life. There are two unhealthy reactions to your loss that you need to consider and release if you ever want to get past the state of mind that you're in. One of them is repression. The other is suppression. Repression is when you feel lost and you unconsciously stuff it down inside. And suppression is when you deliberately suppress it down inside and you never let it out. You don't want anybody to know your emotions, not even God. If you hold on to those hurts long enough, if you don't let those hurts out, you'll do one of two things. If you don't let it out, you will eventually act it out in unhealthy ways. Let me say that again. If you don't let it out in healthy ways, you will act it out in unhealthy ways. In ministry, I see this all the time. I see people walking around defeated in life, depressed, hopeless. And because they never learned to grieve over their loss, they go through life down, depressed, and it goes all the way back into their childhood. They never learned to grieve about a drug addict dad, an alcoholic mom, a bully at school, whatever it may be. They never grieved and let it out. So in essence, you know what happens? They act it out in all kinds of ways. It comes out in physically, it comes out mentally. Many doctors have determined that many health problems that people deal with today are unresolved grief, unresolved regrets, unresolved resentment. And I believe that a lot of medical issues is because of unresolved grief, unresolved resentment, and unresolved regrets in our life. And if you learn to grieve over your losses, no matter how far back you need to go, write these things down. Go back and figure it out. If you go back and you learn to grieve over these losses, I believe it'll be a beginning and a starting point of releasing all those things in your life. And you'll begin to see your depression go away, maybe your anxiety go away, and your anger go away. Loss is inevitable. You're going to feel loss. At some point in your life, you're going to feel an emotional crisis of a loss, whatever that may be. But your grief over it is a choice. You can stuff it down or you can let it out. The choice is yours. And I want you to know, grief is God's gift to us to help us deal with our crisis, our losses, and it is a healthy response. And so I want you to understand that when you grieve, God grieves with you. He doesn't just look down and say, "Oh, I'll straighten up." No, he's moved in his own spirit toward you because he grieves with you. God doesn't just ignore your pain. He doesn't just say that you're on your own and that you need to straighten up. No, God actually grieves with you. I want you to know that he cares about you. He doesn't just leave you to yourself. It isn't that he doesn't know, but he wants you to acknowledge him. And in your grief, do you know it's a form of worship when you give your life to him and you cry out to God? Even if you're angry with him, even when you are calling to him, you know why? Because you're talking to God. You're complaining to God, not complaining about God. Complaining to God is a form of worship. But complaining about God is disobedience. But complaining to God, because you're crying out to him. I want you to hear what it says in 1 Peter 5:7. It says, cast all your cares on him, for he cares for you. God cares for you. Psalm 55:22. Cast your burden on the Lord. He shall sustain you. Matthew 10:29-31 says this. Are not two sparrows sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground apart from your Father's will? But the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not fear, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. Hebrews 13:5-6 says this. For he himself has said, I will never leave you or forsake you. So we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? You see, grief, or God gave us the emotions of grieving. Your emotions are given to you by God. So use them. Allow yourself to hurt, to feel the loss. As I said, it is a gift from God that you grieve. In Psalm 34:18 says, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart. I want you to know right now that grief is not meant to be handled alone. If you want to get past your loss, be able to handle your crisis, then you need others around you. Grief is not meant to be handled alone. If you get sick, you need a doctor. When you're spiritually sick, you need others around you. You need your pastor, or you need your church family. Grief is not meant to be handled alone. Grief is meant to be shared by other people. It is healthy to let other people help you, but oftentimes we refuse the help in our hour of need. When you need a doctor, you get medications, don't you? You don't deny it. No, I'm not going to get my antibiotics. No, when they prescribe something, you go and take that medication to help you get better. You allow the doctor to examine you, help you, and prescribe things to you. It's the same way with our spirit when we're spiritually sick with our family. You need others around to help you. You need a church around you, a brother, a sister, a pastor. So let others help you. When God put man in the garden, he didn't say, what did he say? He said it isn't good for man to be alone. God made us for relationships, to relate to one another. It doesn't matter if you are married or not married. Put good people in your life. Cultivate good relationships. I said that in the previous message and the things. Here, I want you to hear what Galatians 6:2 says. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, you'll obey the law of Christ. Romans 12:5 says, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. If you share someone's pain with them, remember this. Comparing your past pain with them never helps and never comforts them. Just go and be with them. Just go and be with them. Okay? So I want you to understand that you need to grieve. I'm going to pick this up next week. There's going to be another video on this. Okay? But I want you to stop this video. I want you to look. I want you to discuss. You don't have to discuss your personal grief, but maybe you can discuss with each other how I'm grieving, how I feel. Yes, I'm quick to anger. Maybe you need to write things down. Go back and write them down and say, okay, here's all my pain. Okay, here's all my pain. And go back to where you're stuck. And maybe you can find that. And when you can't go back any further, focus on those things. Learn to grieve over them. Bring other people around you. In your small groups, cultivate those relationships. Be close to each other. When somebody's sick, call them. Love each other. And in this way, we will find ourselves in the beginnings of the restoration that I will talk about. When we get into our struggle, how you're going to deal with your struggle, and then you'll be restored to your rightful place. God bless you. Happy small groups, and I hope this message is helpful for you. God bless you.